इश्यू है, ये डेस्कटॉप में कुछ कोई बात नहीं।
ओहो! Am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Are we audible to all the participants and honorable judges?
Yes, you're audible.
Yes.
Yep.
But we are not able to hear you. Let us rejoin it again.
Okay.
ये अनम्यूट कीजिए जा रहे अनम्यूट किया ना हाँ अभी ट्राई करना क्योंकि आपका म्यूट था
Am I audible?
हाँ मैडम नमस्कार
Am I audible to honorable judges and the teammates?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm the court master of the day, and with the due permission of the judges, may I introduce our honorable judges?
Please do.
Okay. So our first judge is Shanta Devi Raman ma'am. She is a lawyer and active participant around 25 years in commercial and corporate advisory. She has conducted more than 1,000 cases in Supreme Court and High Court and has so many reported and unreported judgments to her credit. Our second honorable judge is Mr. Pradeep Kumar Arya sir. He is practicing since 1992 before the Supreme Court and High Court and also handled so many high-profile cases as defense counsel. So with the due permission of the honorable judges, I want to start the...
Yes. Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon,
The
madam.
very best to the participants.
Yeah.
I wanted to know the time taken by the defense counsel and the prosecution. How many
Am I
times?
audible?
Yes.
Okay, so speaker one for the defense will be taking 15 minutes of time of this honorable court, and speaker two will be taking 13 minutes, and 2 minutes are reserved for the rebuttals.
And from the prosecution side?
So I'm speaker one. I'll be taking 14 minutes. My co-counsel will take 14 minutes as well, and 2 minutes for the rebuttal.
Will you please repeat?
Team 504 is for the state,
Yes, Your
Yes,
Lordship.
sir.
and 3535 is for defense.
Team 1,
Yes, Your
please,
Lordship.
will you please repeat the timing?
Speaker one will take 14 minutes. Speaker two will take 14 minutes as well, and 2 minutes for the rebuttal by speaker two.
Okay, thank you.
Start.
May it please this honorable court that I am counsel one for state in the case of State versus Sameer and others. If your lordships permit, may I provide a brief summary of the facts of the case?
Please do.
On 25th February 2015, the Delhi police raided the general coach of Faraka Express train, and they searched two suspected persons, namely accused number 1 Sameer and accused number 2 Monu, and they found a fake currency of face value of rupees 5 lakh each from both the accused persons. It was revealed in further investigation that both the accused had got this currency from accused number 3 Kalu, and they were supposed to deliver it in Pulwama, Jammu and Kashmir, to accused number 4 Peter. It was further revealed during investigation that accused number 5 Sohail is the main conspirator of the bomb attack that they were planning on 15th August 2015 on an army convoy in Pulwama. The fake currency notes were sent for expert examination to CFSL CBI, and it was opined that these were fake Indian currency notes of high quality. Further, on 22nd June, Peter died of suicide, and on 23rd June, the NIA arrested accused number 3 Kalu, and accused number 5 Sohail is still absconding. So charges were framed against all the accused under section 120B, 121, 123, 201, 489B, 489C of IPC, and 16, 17, 18, and 20 of UAPL. The prosecution mainly has three submissions. Firstly, that the accused need to be held guilty under section 120B, 121, and 123 of the IPC. Secondly, that the accused should be that the accused need to be held guilty under section 489B, 489C, and 201 of IPC. And thirdly, that the accused are liable under section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of UAPN. I will be dealing with the first two submissions, and my co-counsel will deal with the third submission. If your lordships permit, may I start with my first submission?
Please go ahead.
It is the contention of the prosecution that all the accused number 1 to 5, have conspired together to carry out a bomb blast in Pulwama. Accused number 1 and 2 were caught carrying FICN in Delhi railway station, and they've admitted to the fact that they were carrying this FICN to accused number 4 Peter in Pulwama, and they were given this FICN by accused number 3 Kalu. The circulation of FIC notes in India is itself an act that damages the monetary system of India, and prima facie evidence is enough that all the accused had an agreement to carry out an illicit act, because all the accused are from different parts of the country. So prima facie evidence is enough that they had an agreement to prove the conspiracy among them. If this honorable court may look at the case of Shivnarayan Lakshminarayan Joshi versus State of Maharashtra, the Honorable Supreme Court held that it is manifest that a conspiracy is always hatched in secrecy and impossible to adduce direct evidence of the same. The offense can be only largely be proved from inferences drawn from the acts or illegal omissions committed by the conspirators in pursuance of a common design. In the present case, all the accused had an agreement to carry out a bomb blast in Pulwama. sorry, Your Lordship. If Your Lordships may look at 17.16, in the CDR analysis, it is clear that all the accused were in constant touch of each other. And accused number 3, Kalu, was also in touch of accused number 5, Sohail, who was the main conspirator of the attack. If Your Lordship also look at 17.27, accused number 3, Kalu, has admitted to the fact that delivery of FICN took place at his house in the presence of Sohail. This also draws the link between accused number 1 and 2 and accused number 5, Sohail. If Your Lordship look at the CDR analysis, it is proven that accused number 1 and 2 have been to West Bengal thrice before the offense finally took place. This shows the elaborate planning that they had done. In the case of Chandraprakash versus State of Rajasthan, the Supreme Court observed that there cannot be any direct evidence related to conspiracy. Circumstances proved before, during, and after the occurrence have to be considered to decide about the complicity of the accused. In the present case, circumstances proved before the offense took place is that the accused number 1 and 2 had been to Malda, West Bengal thrice before. They were all in constant touch of each other. Even they left for Delhi from Malda instead of leaving from Madhya Pradesh, which they were a resident of. Also, circumstances proved during the offense that took place is that accused number 1 and 2 were traveling in a general coach of a train. They were carrying FICN with denomination of up to rupees 10 lakh, and they were traveling in general coach. Also, the money was found in a secret cavity of their bag. This shows that they had every intention to hide the money from the police and sneak away. If Your Lordship look at the statement of accused number 3, Kalu, he has admitted to the fact that he knew the blast code of the attack. He has said that Sohail called him and stated, sorry, दुल्हन की विदाई का वक्त बदलना है, admitting he knew about the blast code of the planned attack. In Yaqub Abdul Razak Menon versus the state of Maharashtra, the Supreme Court held that the agreement may be proved by necessary implication. It is not necessary that each member of the conspiracy must know all the details of the conspiracy. Hence, it can be inferred that all the accused had an agreement to carry out an illicit act, even though they did not know all the details of the act. Therefore, they need to be held liable under Section 120B of the IPC.
Counsel, so as far as the CDR is concerned, you are relying upon it for the communication between which accused?
Accused number 1 and 2 were in constant touch with accused number 3 and 4, and accused number 3 was in touch with all the other accused.
Accused number 1 was in touch only with 3. Do you have anything to show that accused number 1 was in touch with 5?
Your Lordship, if you look at 17.27, paragraph 17.27 of the moot proposition, accused number 3 has said that the delivery of FS...
Screen share it.
I don't have the number. Yes, Your Lordship.
$17.27.
27. Your Lordship, I don't have the moot proposition with me right now, but in 17.27, accused number 3, Kalu, has admitted to the fact that the delivery of FICN took place in the presence of Sohail. 17.27 of the moot proposition.
Okay. So A1 admitted to have links with A5.
Yes,
This is your proposition?
Yes, Your Lordship. Your Lordship, accused number 3 pointed out his own house where delivery of FICN took place in presence of Sohail. So it is the admission of accused number 3, Kalu.
When was the statement recorded?
During the investigation, Your Lordship.
Is it statement under 161?
Yes, Your Lordship.
Okay, please go ahead.
If Your Lordship's permit, may I move on to my second submission that the accused number 1, 2, and 3 are guilty under section 121 and 123 of the IPC?
Yes.
It is found that there is willful circulation of high quality FICN printed abroad and smuggled into India, as admitted by Kalu in his statement as DW3, that they started receiving funds from Pakistan and Bangladesh with intent to threaten the economic security and sovereignty of this country. Section 121 of the IPC lays down punishment for waging war against the government of India or an attempt to wage such a war. The Supreme Court in the case of Ajmal Muhammad Amir Kasab versus State observed that Terrorist Act and the act of waging a war can overlap. Since in the present case, the accused were carrying FICN knowing that it was going to be used to carry out a bomb blast, the act of waging war and the Terrorist Act overlaps. Accused number 2 in his statement as DW2 has stated that, for this, my first job was to figure out those people in the institution who can help me out in the successful conduction of the project against the government. Here, the conduction of the project against the government that accused number 2 is talking about is waging a war against the government, for which he found like-minded people in the other accused who together hatched this elaborate plan to disrupt public tranquility and wage a war against the government. The Honorable Supreme Court in the case of High Court of Karnataka versus Sayyid Muniruddin Mullah observed that the organizing or joining an insurrection against the government of India is also a form of war. Insurrection, as defined in dictionaries and as used in common parlance, connotes a violent uprising by a group directed against the government in power or the civil authorities. Accused number 1.
Counsel, as far as the last two judgments are concerned, that will become applicable only if you are able to show the complete link between A1 to A5. Are you taking this statement, this fact and this argument only for A3, or are you taking it for 1, 2 and 3?
1, 2 and 3, Your Lordship.
If it is 1, 2 and 3, then in that case, because your A5 is absconding,
yes, sir,
and A4 has already died, so in view of that, unless you show the link between A1 and A5, we cannot presume, because you are a prosecution. You will have to show that link.
Yes. Accused number 1, 3 and 1, 2, 3 and 5 were all part of the same organization, Your Lordship. It is clear that there is a clear link between accused number 1 and 3, and also there is a clear link between accused number 3 and accused number 5. Accused number 3 has admitted in his statement as defense witness 3 that he knew accused number 5 since the last 6 years. So all of them were working for the same organization. Your Lordship, this is a highly trained organization. Even though there is no, I agree, there is no direct link, but there is enough circumstantial evidence to prove that there is link between all the accused.
Okay, please proceed.
Organizing or joining an insurrection against the government of India is also a form of war, and all the accused in the statements have admitted to the fact they were working against the government of India. So all of them were part of this insurrection against the government of India, as is evident by their acts as well as their statements.
A1 and A2 in their disclosure statement have only admitted to the extent of a counterfeiting notes, and they have not admitted anything with regard to any other offense which you are trying to establish against them.
Your Lordship, if you look at the statement of defense witness 2, that is A2, he has said that his first job was to figure out those people in the institution who can help me out in the successful conduction of project against the government. He has himself admitted to this fact.
Okay.
I have just quoted him here. In the present case, the accused had planned to attack the Indian army, and the sole purpose to attack the army was to prove the point that India is not a country worth living. Furthermore, the attack that accused have planned, if executed, would have spelled disaster for the whole nation. Even though the act could not be completed because of the intervention of the Delhi police, it cannot be said that this was not an attempt, because the accused had done enough preparation for the same. The same parallel can be drawn from the case of state of Maharashtra versus Mohammad Yaqub, wherein the accused made a preparation to export silver illegally outside the country, but the custom officer intervened and they could not do the same. But the Supreme Court observed that since the accused had done all the preparation, it can be said that there was an attempt. Similarly, in the present case, there was an attempt to wage a war against the government. In the case of Nazir Khan versus State of Delhi, the Supreme Court observed that any amount of violence, however insignificant, directed against the government of India will be high treason. And as soon as violence has any political objects, the accused shall have intention of waging war against the government of India. Therefore, planning a bomb attack on 15th August, that is the Independence Day, on the army convoy falls under the ambit of Section 121, since the government of India is not restricted to the executive limb of the government. It includes the sovereignty of India as well as the people of India. Therefore,
Counsel, as far as the bomb blast is concerned, you are establishing this fact through which accused?
accused number 5, Your Lordship.
So, accused number 5, was there any incriminating evidence found against him or against other accused when the search was conducted?
Your Lordship, incriminating evidence could not be found because accused number 5 is absconding and has not been caught yet. But accused number 1, 2, and 3 have themselves said that accused number 3 was the main conspirator of this attack.
But as long as there is no incriminating evidence found against A5, and for whatever reasons, so your theory of establishing bomb blast plan, so how do you establish that?
Your Lordship established that through the call records of the accused, they were in constant touch of each other. And also, Your Lordship, the accused are found carrying FICN. So, according to Section 15 of the UAPA, carrying FICN is seen as a terrorist act.
As far as A1 and A2 are concerned, they were carrying the currency notes.
Yes, Your Honor.
They, with knowledge or without knowledge, is the requirement of the section of 489B and C,
Yes.
which also you will have to overcome.
Yes.
Even presuming that with knowledge they were carrying it, still with regard to the bomb blast, how do you link up 1 and 2 with bomb blast?
Your Lordship, they were working for, and they themselves have admitted that they were working for an organization that works against the government. They have said that they were working for the betterment of the society, but that is not true. The call detailed records prove that all of them were part of this conspiracy to show that India is not a country worth living. They were caught carrying FICN, and also, Your Lordship, accused number 1 and 2 have stated in the statement that they were supposed to carry 5 lakh worth denomination of FICN to Peter. What about the other 5 lakh worth of denomination? They were going to use that for themselves. They were all a part of this entire conspiracy, and they have admitted this themselves also.
But 161 statement, if it is not supported by complete evidence or disclosure, how will you be able to completely rely upon that?
Yes, Your Lordship. If you look at Section 27 of the Evidence Act, if it leads to some discovery, then if those statements are confessions or not, they can be admissible. The discovery that was made in 17.27, Kalu himself pointed to the house. The police were not aware of this fact. A discovery was made, and therefore it must be admissible under Section 27 of the Evidence Act.
So when you are bringing it under Section 27, of course, you are drawing an exclusion to 25. And there has to be then the link should be there with regard to A5 and again about their terrorist activities also. So how will you pass that test?
Your
Under
Lordship,
Section 27.
Your Lordship, they all that called it detailed records, and they were traveling. Your Lordship, the accused number 1 and 2 were residents of Madhya Pradesh. They traveled all the way to West Bengal. They collected the FICN. Then they took a train from Malda Town railway station, and then they went to Jammu and Kashmir. All of this it is very reasonable that they are not doing this for sensitizing villagers. It is clear that their aim was to carry out a bomb blast, Your Lordship, and also under 106 of Evidence Act, accused number 1 and 2 have the responsibility to prove if it is within the knowledge why they were carrying such large amount of FICN. And they were also 17.27, accused number 3, Kalu has pointed out to the fact himself that delivery of FICN took place in the presence of Sohail. And also he has admitted to the fact that the money was being trafficked in from Pakistan and Bangladesh. In his statement, he has admitted to this fact also.
Speaker number 1, your time is over.
Your Lordship, if I could get 2 more minutes, I could just finish it very fast.
Pradeep ji, what do you say?
Well, can you tell whether you have this, where these people conspired? Meeting of mind is one thing. Meeting at a certain place to conspire is another thing.
Yes, Your Lordship, they conspired in West Bengal. In Kaliachak, West Bengal, the call detail records clearly prove that they were present in Kaliachak, West Bengal, thrice before the offence actually took place.
But you don't have the conversation, what actually transpired between the two callers. That's not with you. So simply by looking at that these two persons were calling each other, you are drawing, as conspiracy can be inferred from the circumstances. Same way, from mere this circumstance, these two people are calling each other. You're drawing this inference.
No, Your Lordship,
They would be talking only about this illegal activity.
Your Lordship, Reliance also has to be placed on their acts. Accused number 4, Peter, died of suicide after he was fearing that the police were making arrests.
The person who is not available to answer why he committed suicide, but you as a prosecutor drawing full-fledged inference against him that he conspired because he was involved in this crime.
Your Lordship, along with the CDRs, the statements of the accused that they have themselves contradicted. The accused number 1 was seen saying that they used to they used to try to sensitize villagers nearby, but he was traveling all the way to Jammu and Kashmir. He is contradicting his own statement. He has not specified any reason why he was caught with FICN, why the FICN was caught in a secret cavity of his bag. This shows his entire intent. Accused number 2 in a statement has said that they were working against the government of India. There are 313 CRPC statements that are completely admissible, along with the circumstantial evidence.
Statement completely admissible. No.
Your Lordship, sorry?
Statement of accused recorded under section 313 CRPC is not admissible that way. It is without oath. This statement is not even taken on oath. It can help the prosecution to some extent, but it cannot be taken as an admission.
Sir, Your Lordship, 303 statements were taken in front of a magistrate. They are admissible.
313 statements are always before the court.
Yes.
On conclusion of the evidence of the prosecution, under the law, duty is cast upon the judge to call the accused and ask him, take his or her explanation on every incriminating evidence which has come on record during the trial.
Yes, sir.
These explanation may be true or sometimes may not be true. Even if it is not true, slightest inference may be drawn. Not just on the basis of 313, if somebody comes and says that, yes, I have committed the crime, but the prosecution has no evidence. On the basis of 313, I doubt there can't be any conviction.
Your Lordship, we are not just relying on 313 statements or on CDRs. The 313 statements, the acts of the accused themselves, the CDRs altogether is enough evidence to prove that the accused have committed this conspiracy. If Your Lordship's permit, I would like to move on, since I have less time left, I would like to move on to section 489B and 489C of the IPC and to prove that the accused had mens rea of carrying out this illegal act. So, under section 489B, Section 489B deals with using as genuine, forged or counterfeit currency. It can be said that both Samir and Monu wouldn't blindly follow Kalu and carry the money to Pulwama unless they knew its real nature and what the money was going to be used for. Accused number 1 in his statement has said that he was entrusted with the work of raising funds, sensitizing people against the malpractices of government, and conducting skill development training program in order to empower villagers residing nearby. But he has himself contradicted his statement. He has moved all the way to Jammu and Kashmir with FICN of 5 lakh denomination each. They have that the possession of these notes by the accused for any other reason is inexplicable. because clearly such large amount is not needed for sensitizing villagers. In the case of Radheshyam and others, the court held that the accused must have the knowledge or reason to believe that the notes were counterfeit or forged. This proof need not necessarily be by direct evidence. The various circumstances leading to the seizure of forged notes, the manner in which the accused came into possession of those notes are important circumstances to be considered. In case of Rayub Jusaf Samar versus State, the division bench of Gujarat High Court observed that possession of large number of fake currency notes is a case of active transportation of such notes. In the same case, when the accused were found in possession of large number of counterfeit currency notes, it was held that it gave rise to a presumption that the possession of such notes was for the purpose of trafficking in currency notes. Accused number 1 and 2 have admitted in the statements that they were given these currency notes by accused number 3, Kalu. Therefore, all three of them need to be held guilty under section 489B of IPC, since all three of them had enough mens rea and they had all the knowledge that the counterfeit currency was going to be used to carry out a bomb blast. Section 489C deals with possession of counterfeit and forged currency notes. In Lordship, it is evident that both the accused were caught red-handedly in possession of the currency notes, and hence mens rea has already been proved. Accused number 1, 2, and 3 need to be held guilty under section 489C of IPC as well. If the Lordships could look at the case of State of Maharashtra versus Malik Saidul Sheikh and others, the Bombay Sessions Court held that the offence of trafficking in forged or counterfeit currency notes is an offence which possesses a challenge to the economy of the country. These offences cannot be viewed lightly. Hence, the court needs to act stringently in these cases, and the accused need to be held guilty under section 489B and 489C of the IPC. I would like to...
I'm sorry to interrupt. Against Kalu, you have only two things. Number one, the disclosure of these accused 1 and 2, who says that they have received this fake currency from him.
Yes,
Number 2, the frequent calls between these, Kalu and accused number 1 and 2.
Also, in moot proposition in 17.27, Kalu himself has said that the delivery of FICN took place at his house and in the presence of Sohail, accused number 5.
Sohail is not available.
Yes, but Kalu is, and he himself has stated this.
He made disclosure statement during investigation.
Yes, Your Honor. Something
recovered in pursuance to the disclosure or not?
Your Lordship, he has stated that the currency was delivered in...
Dwara suno. Something recovered in pursuance to that disclosure or not, made by this third person, Kalu at West Bengal.
Yes, Your Lordship, the fake currency was recovered and also the CDN analysis shows all the presence at that time.
No, the question of the learned judge is that because you are bringing it under section 27 of Evidence Act, was there any recovery after the disclosure statement by A3? That is a learned judge's query.
Yes, Your Lordship, the disclosure was only that the delivery took place in the presence of Sohail, accused number 5.
Okay.
Your Lordship, I would like to move on to my last submission that all the accused are guilty under section 201 of the IPC. Section 201 of the IPC deals with causing disappearance of evidence of offence or giving false information to screen offender. In the present case, all the ingredients of section 201 are met out. Not only was an offence committed, but also all the accused had sufficient knowledge to believe that an offence was committed. Important evidence which could have aided the investigation and was made to disappear by Kalu as given in paragraph 17.28 of the moot proposition. Accused number 1 and 2 also in the statement has said that they were working for the betterment of the society, but in fact they were working to wage a war against the government. They were working in an insurrection against the government. All of them have given false information, therefore they need to be held guilty under section 201 of IPC. To sum up all my submissions, I would like to state that all the accused need to be held guilty under section 120B of the IPC, 121, 123, 201, 489B and C of the IPC, and my co-counsel will deal with the further submission.
Fine.
If it pleases the court, this is speaker number 2 from team code 504, and the counsel would like to address the third issue. With the prior permission of the court, the counsel would like to seek the court's permission to address the court collectively as your honor or your honorable court. Much obliged. The two accused persons, as my co-counsel stated, were caught in possession of the fake notes at Old Delhi railway station on the basis of secret information which was obtained by the special cell of Delhi police. The two accused had tried to be discreet by hiding the fake notes in hidden pockets of their bags, and the fake notes were recovered by the police upon searching the bags thoroughly. The accused number 3 was working in cohort with accused number 1 and 2 and 4 and 5 to smuggle these counterfeit notes to commit a terrorist act in Jammu and Kashmir. The accused person were working in a hierarchy wherein accused number 5, Sohail, would be in constant touch with the terrorist outfit or organization known as LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba, and would relay the message to accused number 3, who would in turn convey the message to accused number 1, 2, and 4. All the accused persons therefore should be liable to be punished under section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the UAPA. The UAPA was amended in 2012 and criminalized economic destabilization of the nation's economy. The section 15A was amended keeping in view that the threat possessed by circulation of high quality counterfeit notes would destabilize the economic security of the nation. Therefore, the government of India made certain amendments to this section, making production, smuggling, or circulation of counterfeit notes a terrorist activity and would therefore be liable for punishment laid down under section 16 of the UAPA. Further reliance must be placed on the case of Yaqub Menon versus State of Maharashtra, wherein the Supreme Court held that in order to constitute a crime under section 15 of the UAPA, an attempt must be made or an attempt must be attempted. In this particular case, under the circumstances that have been brought to the attention of this honorable court, an attempt was clearly made to smuggle these counterfeit notes via the general coach of a railway train. In the present matter, full reliance can also be placed upon the statement made by Guddu Singh, prosecution witness number 1, as annexed to the proposition as Exhibit 7, that he gave the nuance that led to the apprehension of both the accused. Further, the statement made by accused number 1, 2, and 3 describe the nature of each person's involvement in this particular case. The prosecution has relied upon the findings of CFSL reports, 3 CFL reports, which prove that the counterfeit notes were of high quality counterfeit notes and the accused attempted to use these as originals and circulate these in the Indian market. The fake currency notes fall under the definition of high quality counterfeit notes currency, which have been laid down under the purview of Schedule 3 of UAPA. Moreover, the statements given by the accused involve the name of a highly prolific terrorist outfit known as Lashkar-e-Taiba. The statements made by Monu and Samir brought to light that they received 10% commission for delivering fake notes from point A to point B, namely Malda to Jammu Kashmir, and they received these notes from Kalu, accused number 3. This further explains the previous trips that these two accused made to Malda in July and September of the previous year. And this also explains why they had switched off their phones after leaving Malda. They in their statements also stated that they received instructions from the Kalu received instructions from Sohail, who in turn received instructions from overseas. The accused number 1 and 2 were also aware of the blast codes and disclosed this information to the police during investigation.
Counsel,
Yes,
when
yes.
you're talking about the commission, so as a prosecution in any of your list of documents, have you proved that any commission was received by A1 or A2, either for this or for any of the earlier assignments which was carried out?
Your ladyship, since all of these transactions were made in cash, it would not be possible for the police to trace these cash back to the accused number 1 and 2. Since there were no official bank records or any transaction made via bank accounts, therefore no such evidence could be traced back to accused number 1 and 2. And such terrorists are very careful when it comes to such activities and try and stay under the radar of the police.
But this would be a presumption. But what does the record say?
Your ladyship, this is not a presumption. This was a fact disclosed by accused number 1 and 2 during the investigation, and this would be admissible under the section 27 of the Evidence Act. which trumps section 25 and 26.
But the prosecution traced out one of the bank accounts and they even compared it with the mobile number.
That would
But
be of
further investigation, why was it not carried out with regard to the tracing out of the commission?
Your Ladyship, that was the accounts that were traced were of accused number 3 and his wife, and indeed they did find certain discrepancy in the bank account statements of accused number 3 and his wife.
But that did not lead to any payment, either him receiving it or him giving it to one or two.
No, Your Ladyship, there's no direct link because such terrorists are very careful when it comes to such certain activities, and they try and stay under the radar by not using bank accounts or official transactions.
Proceed, please.
Much obliged. The statements made by Samir and Monu also highlight the role of Peter and that he was involved and was to receive these counterfeit notes from them upon their arrival in Jammu and Kashmir. Following the knowledge of their arrest, Peter expired by suicide, fearing his own arrest. The only deduction that can be made is that if it was not for a very inhuman crime, the accused would not have committed such an act. All the statements which led to discovery of various undisputed facts, along with all the call records which assert a connection between all the accused, along with the discovery made of the counterfeit notes by an independent witness, contribute towards a notion of involvement of the accused with a terrorist organization. Therefore, all statements made to the police all the statements made to the police would be admissible before this court under Section 27 of the Indian Evidence Act, and further reliance must be placed on Navaneet Krishnan versus the state of Rajasthan, wherein the court has held that Section 27 of Indian Evidence Act trumps or the confessional statements made, which would be deemed inadmissible under Section 25 and 26, and making all such statements which disclose certain facts to the police would be admissible. Further,
Speaker number 2, your time is over.
The counsel will like about 2 minutes to conclude his arguments. Moving further to Section 15, which clearly defines the terrorist activity, which includes smuggling and circulation of counterfeit notes, in which case basically here accused number 1 and 2 were caught in possession of. The actions of the accused person would definitely qualify as terrorist activity under Section 15, thus making them liable for punishment under Section 16 of the UAPA. Moving further, the reliance must also be placed upon Section 43E of UAPA, wherein if accused is found in possession of such notes or explosives, as mentioned under Section 15 of the UAPA, there is evidence which connects these materials to commission of a terrorist activity, then the court must presume that the accused has committed such an offense, and it is upon the defense to prove anything otherwise. It is also pertinent to note that Section 17 of the UAPA states the punishment for raising funds for terrorist activity. Accused number 1, 2, and 3 have clearly admitted that they were raising funds for a certain project, which was basically a indirect code name maybe for their terrorist activity. The organization they were working for, which worked for upliftment of the oppressed and the poor, was basically a front for terrorist activities, and they used this so that they would stay under the radar of the government and the police. The same can be corroborated by the statements made during the evidence. Reliance must be placed on Ridal Hussain Khan versus NIA, wherein the Honorable Special Court stated the expression that whoever raises funds for the purpose of committing a terrorist act is therefore liable for punishment under Section 17 of the UAPA. The offense has been purposely created to prevent raising of funds intended to be used of the terrorist acts. Moving further, Section 18 of the UAPA states that the accused will be liable for conspiring, abetting a terrorist organization in committing of a terrorist activity. Each accused here has played a separate and independent role, which is crucial and integral to the commission of this terrorist activity. If it had not been for the crucial intervention made by the Delhi police, the act would have been commissioned on the 15th of August. Each accused were aware of their part that they were to play in this conspiracy and were careful with respect to the same. The Honorable Supreme Court in the case of State of Maharashtra versus Somnath Thapa and others has held that to establish a certain charge of conspiracy, knowledge and indulgence in either illegal activity or giving means to an illegal activity is necessary. Further reliance must also be placed in the case of Shivnarayan Lakshminarayan Joshi versus State of Maharashtra and Chandra Prakash versus State of Rajasthan, as stated by my co-counsel, wherein no direct evidence is required to prove conspiracy, and circumstances which have occurred before, during, or after the arrest point towards the conspiracy. Moreover, moving further, Section 20 of the UAPA states the punishment for being a part of a
Speaker
terrorist
number
gang.
2, your extra time is over.
Yes,
Stop.
I would like to conclude herein by placing reliance on a very crucial
Do
judgment.
do it fast.
Yes, Your Lordship. The reliance on the matter, which is on the judgment of State of Maharashtra versus Ravi Dhiren and others, wherein the NIA of Greater Mumbai, the Special Court of NIA of Greater Mumbai had specifically tried a matter wherein the circumstances and evidence provided before the Special Court were of identical nature, and the facts were also identical, wherein accused were caught in possession of over 350 counterfeit notes of each denomination of rupees 1000. The Special Court therein found all the accused guilty of all the charges, including 120B, 121, 489B, 489C, and Section 15, 16 of the and 18 of the UAPA. If the court is pleased with the submissions of the council would like to move to the prayers. Wherefore, it is pleased in the lights of arguments stated, facts stated, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, that this Honorable Special Court may be pleased to convict the accused number 1, 2, and 3 for the offences punishable under Section 120B, 489B, 489C, Section 121, 123, 201 of the Indian Penal Code, and Section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act.
Thank you.
Much obliged.
Before I begin, I just want to clarify if I am clearly audible and visible.
You're audible, you're visible. You can start.
May it please the court, this is counsel number 1 on behalf of the respondent in the present case of State versus Sameer and others before this Honorable House Court of Patiala. The counsel seeks permission to collectively address to the bench as your lordships.
Please go ahead.
May the counsel proceed, your lordships.
Yes, yes.
Your lordship, if the bench is well versed with the facts of the case, the counsel would directly move to issues in hand.
Please do that.
Indeed, your lordship. The counsel would now humbly seek permission to commence with the argument raised in issue number 1, that is whether the respondent have committed the alleged offence under Section 120A of Indian Penal Code and are liable to be punished under Section 120B of Indian Penal Code or not.
Go ahead.
Your lordship, the counsel would move forward with the argument for issue number 1 based on 2 limbs. Firstly, they had no knowledge about what they were carrying in the bags, therefore there was no meeting of mind. Secondly, merely being associated with any terrorist organization and not having any knowledge about their whereabouts is not a crime. Concerning the first limb of the argument, the counsel pleads that the elements of a criminal conspiracy have been to be stated: A, an object to be accomplished; B, a plan or scheme embodying means to accomplish that object; C, an agreement or understanding between 2 or more of the accused whereby they became definitely committed to cooperate for the accomplishment of the object by the means embodied in the agreement or by any effectual means; and D, in the jurisdiction where the statute required an overt act. In case of Sudhir Shantilal Mehta versus CBI, the court said the gist of the offence is the bare engagement and association to break the law. Whether any act be done in pursuance thereof by the conspirators or not, meeting of mind is essential. Mere knowledge or discussion is not sufficient. In the present case too, there are not enough evidence to incriminate the respondent's involvement in the criminal conspiracy. No meeting of minds of the respondent has been established by the state. To support this argument, the counsel requests your lordship to refer to page 15 of the written submission, in which the counsel has cited the case of Keher Singh versus State, where both the conspirators were away from the scene of the crime and one of them was acquitted by the Supreme Court. The documents recovered from his custody did not indicate any agreement between him and the other accused. That they only showed his agitated mind, which was in grip of an avenging mood. This is not enough to establish an agreement with anybody. Furthermore, it should be remembered that where there is no direct evidence, for example, through the evidence of an approver, and the case for the prosecution is dependent on circumstantial evidence alone. It is necessary for the prosecution to prove and establish circumstances as would lead to the only conclusion of existence of a criminal conspiracy and rule out the theory of innocence. In the pertinent case, the evidence produced by the prosecution is though circumstantial but not substantive enough to prove the guilt of respondents. The prosecution has simply charged the respondents on mere suspicion about their involvement in the conspiracy. The prosecution has not ruled out the theory of innocence. The whole case of prosecution is based on statement recorded of the respondent during the examination before the police under Section 161 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. According to Section 25 of Indian Evidence Act, no confession made to police officer shall be proved as against a person accused of any offence, and according to Section 26 of Indian Evidence Act, no confession made by any person while he is in custody of police officer, unless it be made in immediate presence of a magistrate, shall be proved as against such a person. The prosecution has relied on the call detailed records in form of technical evidence which may raise suspicion against the accused, but merely the production of call detailed records cannot take the place of proof. Your Lordship, now the counsel move forward towards the second leg of the argument, that is merely being associated with the terrorist organization and not having any knowledge about their whereabouts is not a crime. For the purpose of establishing or proving or the charge.
Counsel, before you go over to the second point,
Yes,
the prosecution had specifically pointed out that the recovery which has been made from A3, the bank, certain bank records and those documents, they are bringing it under recovery in continuation to Section 25, the 161 statement. So they are relating 161 statement with the subsequent recovery which has been made from A3. This is what is their argument is. What is your submission for it?
Your Lordship, according to Section 161 of Code of Criminal Procedure, the statement has been recorded in front of police, and according to Sections 25 and 26, this would not be admissible. According to Section 27, only if new facts are discovered, then it would be admissible, which have not been discovered. And the call detailed records are alone not enough evidence to prove that they were conspiring against something. If the counsel,
so your submission is that the CDR records which has been taken out as a consequence of the disclosure statement is not enough to bring it under the scope of 27, Section 27. Is it so?
Yes, Lordship.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Lordship. For the purpose of establishing or proving the charge of conspiracy, it is not necessary that there should be knowledge of who are the other conspirators of the detailed stage of the conspiracy. The necessary requisite is knowledge of the main object and purpose of the conspiracy. In the present case, the accused A1 and A2 had no knowledge about the main object of the conspiracy, that the said currency was to be used for carrying out a bomb blast on an Indian army convoy. They just believed that they were carrying the currency from the funds they have raised for conducting the skill development training program in order to empower the villagers of oppressed class of society. Besides the statement of the accused given in the course of investigation, there is no other proof that A5 was the main conspirator and the money carried by A1 and A2 was to be used by A4 to carry out a bomb blast. With this being said, the counsel for the respondent culminates the argument for issue number 1 by affirming that the respondent have not committed the alleged offence under Section 120A and are not liable to be punished under Section 120B of the Penal Code. If your Lordship are satisfied with the argument for issue number 1, then the counsel would like to seek permission to proceed to issue number 2, that is whether the respondents have committed the alleged offence under Section 121 and 123 of the Indian Penal Code or not.
Please proceed.
The respondent humbly submit that they have not committed the alleged offence under Section 121 and 123 of Indian Penal Code and are not liable to be punished in the light of following arguments. The evidence required to establish a case under Section 121 of the Penal Code must be directed to proving of the following points. First, the accused wage war or attempt to do so or abet the same. Second, that such war was against the government of India. The expression waging war means and can only mean waging of war in manner usual in war. In other words, in order to support a conviction or such charge, it is not enough to show that the person charged have contrived to obtain possession of an armory and have, when called upon to surrender it, used the rifles and ammunition so obtained against the government troops. It must also be shown that the seizure of the armory was part and parcel of a plan operation, and that their intention in resisting the troops of the government was to overwhelm and defeat these troops and then go on and crush any further opposition, in which they might meet until either the leaders of the movement succeed in obtaining the possession of the machinery of government, or until those in possession of it yielded to the demands of the leaders. In present case, the respondent have neither committed nor abetted the alleged offense of waging of war against the government of India, since they didn't have the mindset of harming the integrity, unity, and sovereignty of the nation, and were merely completing the task that was assigned to them without knowing the repercussions of their actions. They didn't have the necessary mens rea for committing the alleged offense. There was no transmission of thought sharing the unlawful design to wage a war. Moving ahead in the same issue, the Council humbly pleads that the essential of Section 123 are not being fulfilled. The essential elements of the said section are: A. There must be an existence of a design which is prepared to wage war against the government of India. B. The concealment should be done with intention of facilitating the war against the government of India. C. The person should be knowing about the concealment of design. In case of State versus Navjot Sandhu, the court held that no interface can be drawn with a reasonable degree of certainty that wife of Navjot Sandhu was having knowledge of the plan. The scarcity of evidence or record does not justify her conviction. The mere suspicion that she would have known about the movements of her husband is not enough evidence, and therefore she was acquitted. In State versus Mohammed Afzal, Dr. Gilani,
This judgment does not help you, primarily because the prosecution has put in a fact saying that the currency was exchanged between 1, 2, and 3 in the presence of 3, and A5 was also present at that point of time. This is the argument which has been put forth by them. So, what is your response to that?
Your Lordship, only one witness was present there, and it should have been done in presence of 2 witnesses. Secondly, I'm
talking about, I think you did not follow the question. The argument of the prosecution was that when the fake currency notes were exchanged, and A3 had stated that A5 was also present, and the currency notes was handed over to A1 and A2.
There is no witness for this, Your Lordship. They have simply stated this in their statements, and the statements are not applicable.
Please proceed.
In State versus Mohammed Afzal S.R. Gilani gave false statement about his relation with Afzal and Shaukat, but the court held that his statement could be out of fear and it may create a suspicion over him. But this is not enough as evidence to state that Gilani knew about the plan and was involved in it. Therefore, he was acquitted of the charges. Also, in case of Ramana,
if we look at it and if we accept the story of prosecution, but subsequently they were found with the currencies. Even if we discard A3's statement, 161 statement, to the effect that it was given in the presence of A5, and even otherwise, but subsequently it was recovered in the train, at the train when the offense was committed, it was recovered from 1 and 2. What is your answer for this?
Your Lordship, firstly, mere possession is not sufficient, and secondly, the necessary mens rea was not there. They didn't have the intention, they didn't knew. All they knew was they were carrying the funds that have been collected for the funding of the villagers. If the council is satisfied, shall the council move ahead?
Please.
Also, in the case of Rehmana Yusuf Faruqi versus State, the court held that neither the phone calls or bank account are enough evidence to prove that she knew about the terrorist act and was concealing about the same. Similarly, in the case at hand, even if the respondents were talking on phone to each other and gave statements out of fear, it is not enough to prove that they were involved in waging of war. The basic need for waging of is meeting of mind, but none of the statement or evidence prove that the accused were aware about the terrorist intentions. The respondent culminates the argument for issue number 2 by affirming that the respondents have not committed the alleged offence under section 121 and 123 of the Penal Code and are not punishable for the same. If your Lordship are satisfied with the argument for issue number 2, then the council would like to seek permission to proceed to issue number 3. That is whether the respondents have committed the alleged offence under section 489B and 489C of Indian Penal Code or not.
Please proceed.
The respondent most respectfully submits that the counsel have not committed the offence under section 489B and 489C of Indian Penal Code 1860 and therefore are not liable to be punished under the same in light of following argument. The essentials of the section 489B are selling, buying or receiving from any person or otherwise trafficking currency note or banknote, any forged currency or banknote, knowing or having reason to believe that such note was forged or counterfeit. The ingredient of an offence punishable under section 489C of the IPC are as follows. A note in question is currency note or banknote. B, such note was forged or counterfeited. C, the accused was in possession of the currency note or banknote. D, the accused intended to use the same as genuine. E, the accused knew or had a reason to believe the note to be forged. The mens rea of the offences under section 489B and 489C is knowing or having a reason to believe the currency note or banknotes to be forged or counterfeit. Without the aforementioned mens rea, selling, buying or receiving from any other person or otherwise trafficking in or using a genuine forged or counterfeit currency note or banknote is not enough to constitute offence under section 489B of Indian Penal Code. So also possessing or even intending to use any forged counterfeit currency note or banknote is not sufficient to make out a case under section 489C in absence of mens rea. It could also be taken from the case of Manirul Maulavi, Mustafa and others versus State. The appellant were found only guilty of section 489C, which is a bailable offence, and were acquitted from their charge of 489B as no mens rea of them using or trafficking the counterfeit currency notes could be proven. The burden is on prosecution to prove that at the time when the accused was passing the note, he knew it was a forged one. The mere possession of it by him does not shift the burden to the accused to prove his innocent possession of the forged note. Similarly, under section 489C, it is to be proved that the accused intended to use the forged or counterfeit currency note as genuine, or it might be used as genuine. It is for the prosecution to prove the circumstances which would irresistibly lead to the conclusion that the accused had the intention to introduce surreptitiously the note on the public. It is evident that the respondent are mainly found in possession of the currency note. Charge sheet did not contain any material to show that they were proposing to traffic or use the said note as genuine, or they had the knowledge or reason to believe that the said note was forged or counterfeit. When
But
mentioned,
counsel, the speaker number 1 of the prosecution specifically had made a submission stating that it was carried in a general coach of the train and it was specifically hidden in the cavity of the 2 bags which A1 and A2 were carrying. So why all these precautions? How are you going to come out of this?
Your Lordship, as it has been stated in the facts only that they were not so rich people, therefore they were traveling in a general coach, and 10 lakh is a huge amount which they collected for the villagers, and it is obvious that any person who is carrying such a huge amount will definitely try to hide it, will definitely try to secure the amount so that it is not evident to others that they are carrying such a huge amount.
But the amount which was recovered, did you see from the documents filed and the photograph of the notes which have been taken? All of them carry only one number, alphabetical number which is given in the currency note. All the numbers are starting with the same series.
Yes,
so do you mean to say that the money which was collected by you from all over India, and when you are agreeing, there are 2 things, counsel, which you have to meet with. You are agreeing that the accused number 1 and 2 were in possession of the currency notes. You only say that it was collected, but it is not counterfeited. Am I right?
Yes, Your Lordship. Your Lordship, the accused didn't know about the contents.
1
Yes,
minute.
Your Lordship.
So once that is admitted, number 2, you have to come out with the situation and you have to establish that all serial numbers for when it is collected from various fronts in all over India, how could it have only one serial number?
Your Lordship, if the statements are to be read carefully, it is clearly stated that they are not much educated. Secondly, the respondents didn't know the contents of the bag properly. They were just doing what they were told to do. They didn't check it. They didn't know it. Therefore, in the statement, the accused have stated that when they saw police, they got scared because they didn't know what was happening around them. If your lordship is
So your defense is that they were carrying, but they were not aware of the purpose of it, or they were not aware of from the source of it. Is
yes,
it
your
what you're
lordship,
trying to say?
the respondent didn't have the necessary mens rea. They didn't know the content of the bag properly. They were just doing what they were assigned to do.
Properly. So, to what extent they were aware about what is in the bags?
All they knew was that they were carrying some funds which they have collected for the villagers. If your lordship are satisfied, shall the council continue?
Proceed. Continue.
Charge sheet did not contain any material to show that they were proposing to traffic or use the said note as genuine, or they had knowledge or reason to believe that. If your lordships allow, shall the council take 1 minute to conclude?
Yes.
Thank
yes.
you, lordship. When mens rea is conspicuously absent, mere use of any forged or counterfeit currency notes or banknotes cannot attract the provision of section 489B and 489C of the Indian Penal Code. The prosecution has relied on statements of the accused as evidence against them, but according to statements of accused 1 and accused 2, they had no knowledge about the contents of the bag, and they were carrying, and the statement of accused 3 did not disclose that they had provided the fake Indian currency notes to A1 and A2. The respondent culminates the argument for issue number 3 by affirming that the respondents have not committed the alleged offence under section 489B and 489C of the Penal Code and are not punishable for the same. With this being said, if your lordship are satisfied with the argument made, then counsel 1 would rest the argument, and it is humbly requested to your lordship to allow my co-counsel to proceed with the further argument.
Thank you.
Your lordships, before I start with the arguments, I would like to clarify if I am properly audible and visible.
Yes. You're audible.
Much obliged, your lordships. May it please the court, this is counsel number 2 for the respondents appearing before this honorable court in the present case. The counsel humbly seeks permission to commence with arguments raised in issue number 4, that is whether the respondents have committed the alleged offence under section 201 of the Indian Penal Code or not.
Please go ahead. Proceed.
Am I audible?
Yes, you proceed.
Are you able to hear us?
Am I audible, your lordships?
Yes, you proceed.
You are audible. You are audible.
Pardon for the internet connection. The counsel humbly pleads before the honorable court that the respondents have not committed the offence under section 201 of the Indian Penal Code and therefore will not be held liable in the light of the following arguments. In the case of Nathugaram versus State of Uttar Pradesh, it was held that before a conviction under section 201 can be recorded, it must be shown to the satisfaction of the court that the accused knew or had the reason to believe that an offence had been committed, and having got this knowledge, tried to screen the offender by disposing of the dead body. This was followed in the case of Hanuman Prasad and others versus State of Rajasthan, where it was stated by the Honorable Supreme Court that unless the prosecution was able to establish that the accused person knew or had the reason to believe that an offence has been committed or had done something causing the commission of evidence to disappear, he cannot be convicted. It can be inferred from the facts that the statements given by accused A1, A2, and A3 that even though it is presumed that they were carrying the bags which they received from Kalu, they were not aware what they were carrying. And since the most important element is having the knowledge about the offense, the accused were not aware about what they were exactly doing. Hence, the requisite ingredients for the commission of the accused under the said section are not fulfilled. It must be proved that an offense, the evidence of which the accused is charged with causing to disappear, has actually been committed. The intention to screen the offender must be the primary and sole objective of the accused. The fact that the concealment was likely to have that effect is not sufficient. The same was followed in the judgment of Dr. Ravindra Kumar versus State of Bihar. As stated in the cases, the sole object of the accused should be to screen the offender. But in the pertinent case, the accused were not trying to screen the offender. Moreover, no offense has been committed, and neither they believe that an offense has been committed. Therefore, the sole object is not being fulfilled. Therefore, they should not be tried under this section. The facts clearly imply that the respondents were not aware about the repercussions of their actions. Hence, they should not be held guilty under the said section. Mere suspicion is not sufficient. It must be proved that the accused knew or had reason to believe that the offense has been committed, and yet he caused the evidence to disappear so as to screen the offender. Therefore, charge under section 201 of the Indian Penal Code can only be established if there are sufficient evidence. In the light of the aforementioned arguments made and authorities cited, the respondents humbly submit before the Honorable Court that they have not committed the alleged offense under section 201 and are not liable to be punished. Now, if your lordships are satisfied with the arguments for issue number 4, then the council would like to seek permission to proceed to issue number 5, that is, whether the respondents have committed the alleged offenses under section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the UAPA.
I have a question before you proceed to the next point.
Yes, your lordship.
Which portion of the evidence shows that the A1, 2, 3 did not have, at least 1 and 2 did not have knowledge about what they are possessing?
Your lordship, it has not been disclosed anywhere by the prosecution that the respondents have tried to screen the offenders themselves. They have no intention about, they clearly didn't have the knowledge that they have committed an offense.
See, as far as prosecution is concerned, once on the spot there is a recovery of fake notes and the FSL report supports them. And once the recovery and FSL reports with these two, at least a prima facie, they start their case. So for you to start your case, when you talk about knowledge, mens rea, both the things together. So you will have to anyhow show from the evidence we will be as learned judges, we will be able to draw the conclusion that the A1 and A2 did not have a knowledge of what they are carrying.
Lordships, as the counsel, one of the defense has already established the case for the contents of the bags they were carrying, and it is not sufficient that it is not sufficient to establish the mere possession of the counterfeit currency is necessary to establish the offense. The necessary requisite is the mens rea.
Please give me a second. So I have a request to learned judge. So this one question can be put it to speaker 1, that which portion of evidence the speaker 1 or 2 of the defense rely upon to show that the 1 and 2 did not have knowledge about what they are carrying. Can we do that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. So you can choose among speaker 1 and speaker 2 of a defense. You can choose among yourselves. The learned judges want to know as to that which portion of evidence or statement or whatever document you want to show that your clients A1 and 2 did not have knowledge of what they are carrying in the train.
Much obliged, your lordships. The speaker 1 will be dealing with the query.
Your lordship, as the prosecution is considering the statement, we would the respondents would like to consider the statement, and in the statement they have said that they didn't have the knowledge what they were carrying, as stated before as well. If you would allow me, I would like to share the screen and I'll show it to you.
Please.
Thank you, your lordship. Just a second. Here. Your lordship, here it is clearly said, I and Monu didn't know that in bag we were carrying a fake currency notes. As and when train reached Old Delhi railway station, police arrested me, and Monu, we didn't do anything wrong. And after saw many policemen, I felt unconscious.
This is a statement of DW1.
Yes, your lordship.
Just show the beginning of this portion. Of course,
yes,
that's the reason I wanted to see, because Both of you are relying upon the same.
Here it is,
Prosecution
Lordship.
is also relying upon this. You are also trying to rely upon this. That's the reason I wanted to bring this across straight away. So this is the statement of DW1, accused number 1.
Yes, Lordship. Yes, Lordship. And here it is here stated, I and Monu didn't know that here. I and Monu didn't know that in bag we are carrying fake currency notes. As and when Reen reached Old Delhi railway station, police arrest me and Monu, we didn't do anything wrong. And after so many policemen, I felt unconscious.
Okay,
Thank you, Lordship.
thank you. For learned judge, the same line is being referred and relied upon by both parties.
Both the parties.
By both the parties. Yeah, speaker number 2, please proceed.
Much obliged. The council humbly pleads before the Honorable Court that the respondents have not committed the offence under Section 16 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act and therefore will not be held liable in the light of the following arguments. One of the essentials of Terrorist Act under Section 15 of the UAPA is the presence of necessary mens rea to threaten the unity, integrity, security or sovereignty of India or to strike terror in the citizens of India. In the pertinent case, the respondents did not have any intent or the mindset to create the necessary intent to threaten and cause harm to the country in any way. Even if it can be proved that the respondents took part in the series of the steps they took, they cannot be held guilty due to the absence of the necessary mens rea required to commit such acts. It is not prima facie proved that they have committed a terrorist act and hence they should be acquitted. Even though the prosecution has disclosed grave suspicion against the applicant about his probable involved in the alleged offence, but this will not itself take place of prima facie case as defined by the various decisions of honorable upper courts in the case of Ram Govind Upadhyay versus Sudarshan Singh and others and Kalyan Chandra Sarkar versus Rajesh Randan. Only material available on record, as already mentioned, is in the form of statements of accounts in support of which there is no other evidence. Hence, the respondent humbly submit that they have not committed the alleged offence under Section 16 of the UAPA and are not liable to be punished. Now, the council humbly submits before the Honorable Court that the respondents have not committed the offence under Section 16 and therefore will not be held, Section 17 and therefore will not be held liable. In the present case, the respondents are neither involved in the raising or attempting to raise any funds for any individual or terrorist group, nor did they have the knowledge that the bags of fake Indian currency notes they were carrying were counterfeit and they were going to be used for committing a terrorist act. The fact and the statements of the accused, even though wrongly recorded, established the respondents were not aware about the relationship of the fake Indian currency notes and the attack which was to be planned to be executed on 15th August. Therefore, they should not be accused for raising funds about which they were completely unaware of. The council humbly submits before the Honorable Court that the respondents have not committed the alleged offence under Section 18 of the UAPA and will not be held liable in the light of the following arguments. Your Lordships, the council would like to seek permission for extension of 2 minutes to conclude the arguments.
I have no objection.
Do it.
Much obliged. In the case of State of Maharashtra versus Mirza Himayat Inayat Beg, the court observed that upon consideration of the evidence and the circumstances available on record in their entirety, we find that in a case in which the circumstances forming links insofar as offences relating to commission of terrorist acts by entering into conspiracy with other accused and connected offences are concerned, have not been conclusively established in as much as there are missing links in between. In a case like the present case, based upon circumstantial evidence, it is necessary for the prosecution to prove all the relevant circumstances conclusively and in such a manner that even these circumstances are when these circumstances are taken together, they must point towards nothing but the guilt of the accused. As discussed earlier, this is not the case. Here, the regards the offence relating to commission of the terrorist acts and other connected offences. Therefore, the accused deserves to be acquitted of the alleged offence. It is evident from the facts that the accused are not a part of the conspiracy as they had not the necessary mens rea to hurt the sovereignty and integrity of the nation. The respondents did not play any role in the conspiring as they didn't know what they were carrying in the bags. Moreover, no charge sheet was filed under 90 days of the arrest of the accused, nor any application of time extension was filed in the present case. Hence, the respondent humbly submit before the Honorable Court that they have not committed the alleged offence under Section 18 and are not liable to be punished. Moving on, the council humbly submits before the Honorable Court that the respondents have not committed the offence under Section 20 of the UAPA. In state of Kerala versus Ranif, the court held that since the Popular Front of India was not banned, the accused could not be penalized for belonging to it. The court further observed that even if they were to presume that PFI is an illegal organization, they were yet to consider whether all members of the organization can be automatically held to be guilty. In the case of Arup Bhuyan versus State of Assam, the Honorable Court observed that mere membership of a banned organization will not make a person a criminal unless he resorts to violence or incites people to violence or creates public disorder by violence or incitement to violence. The US Supreme Court decision in Elf Brandt versus Russell has rejected the doctrine of guilt by association. It was observed that those who join an organization but do not share its unlawful purpose or who do not participate in its unlawful activities surely pose no threat either as citizens or as public employees. A law which applies to a membership without the specific intent to further the illegal aims of the organization infringes unnecessarily on protected freedoms. It rests on the doctrine of guilt by association, which has no place here. In the present case, the respondents do not belong to any illegal organization, since their organization is not banned under the purview of Schedule 1 of the UAPA, the respondents could not be penalized for belonging to a group alleged to be conducting terrorist activities. Even if it was to be presumed that they are members of an illegal organization, it shall not be considered that they all should be automatically be held guilty. Merely a membership of any group or organization does not establish relations and intentions of an individual. In the light of the aforementioned arguments made and authorities cited, the respondent humbly submit before the Honorable Court that they have not committed the alleged offence under Section 20 of the UAPA and are not liable to be punished. With this being said, if your lordships are satisfied with the arguments made by the counsel for the respondents, rest their contention and humbly seek permission to recite the prayer before this Honorable Court.
Yes.
Much obliged. In the light of the facts presented, issues raised, arguments advanced, and authorities cited, the counsel for the respondents hereby most humbly submit that this Honorable Patiala House Court may be pleased to declare the respondents not guilty and not liable to be charged under Section 120B, 489B, 489C, 121, 123, and 201 of the Indian Penal Code 1860, and under Section 16, 17, 18, and 20 of the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act 1967. The court, being satisfied, may in like manner make any such demand or pass any other order, direction, or relief that this Honorable Court may regard fit in the light of justice, fairness, equity, and good conscience. And for this act of kindness, the counsel for the respondents might, as compelled bound, ever humbly pray.
Thank you.
Much obliged.
Thank you.
If it pleases the court, the counsel would like to begin with the rebuttal.
Yes, yes. Let them start the rebuttal.
I would like to draw the court's attention to the first and foremost point, wherein the speaker one had first held that they were not aware of the components of the bag, and then later admitted that they were carrying certain funds to certain fronts to raise funds for their organization. I would like to draw this court's attention to the 313 statement given by defense witness 1, wherein defense witness 1 has clearly, that means the accused number 1 has clearly admitted that he was tasked to raising funds for the organization. Second, any layman, with irrespective of his educational qualification, upon lifting the bag would know that the bag weighed more than its components stated that are known to the accused. The accused claim that they are not known. Any person who was curious would have at least opened the bag and seen. And as per the police in the police memos that were found, the components that were found were mobile phones and some change. Any bag which weighed more than this, any person would know that a phone does not weigh as much as the bag did. Further, reliance must be placed on the case of Rayab Jusab Sama versus the state, wherein the accused was found in a possession of large quantity of counterfeit currencies. It was therein held that it gave rise to the presumption that the possession of such notes was for the purpose of trafficking the counterfeit currencies. Further, the CDR and the call records, the statements given admissible under Section 27 and the statements given under Section 313 of CRPC are all to be taken into account while noticing that this organization was a very well managed and very well organized outfit. the hierarchy, they functioned in a very specific hierarchy wherein Sohail was in touch with the terrorist outfit from foreign abroad and communicated the messages to other accused. Further, it is also to be noted that the speaker number 2 said that even if accused number 1 and 2 and 3 were part of a terrorist outfit, it would not be a criminal act. Whereas Section 20 of the UAPA specifically mentions that it would be a crime if any of the persons was found to be part of a terrorist organization or a terrorist gang.
No,
Further,
the speaker number 2 was making a mention about the banned outfits. He did
Indeed.
not say that he can be
Indeed,
a part of
indeed.
anyone, but
Indeed,
he
indeed.
said that this is an organization which is not a banned one under the schedule.
Indeed, but the call records clearly prove that they were in contact with a banned terrorist organization, namely LET, and accused number 3 and accused number 5, and all the accused were actually working in cohort for a certain number of years now. Accused number 3 was
Speaker, you don't have counsel. You don't have the CDR records, which between the organization and the A5 allegedly. We are
your leadership. Your leadership, the call records for accused number 5 were obtained, wherein there was a clear link established, which shows that he was in constant touch with senior members of the terrorist outfit. It was obtained, the call records of accused number 5, Sohail, who's absconding.
His call records between A3 and A5 was there.
No, your leadership. If I may
And
draw,
it came in the statement of A3 that Sohail A5 was in contact with the international other terrorist organizations, people. But not his call records showing that any calls from any other country.
uh,
Can you please screen share the portion, relevant portion?
yes, I've just
Which you want to refer to?
yes. Actually, just searching for the relevant paragraph.
In the meantime, I put a question to defense team. You said that there is no mens rea to commit the crime under these relevant provisions under which you were charged and finally the case. What is the best ground on which you say that there was never any mens rea, despite the fact that currency notes were recovered from you? A1 and A2. Despite recovery of currency notes, how do you say that we had no mens rea? Because currency note is never used in the temples and puja sthals. They are always used to destroy the economy of a country. It definitely would be used for economic offense to make a country weak. How do you come out from the mens rea? What is the strongest point? Say in a line, without any lamba arguments, say in a line. How do you say, despite all this, that there is no mens rea to commit the crime?
Your Lordship, to begin with, firstly, I would like to, the council would like you to consider the case of Madan Lal Sharma versus State.
You have admitted that they had no proper knowledge about what is in the text.
Yes, Your Lordship, and there it is stated that mere possession would not shift the burden of proof.
Yeah, I'm not burden of proof. I'm not against grave suspicion or mere suspicion. I'm not on those points. My point is, in the light of what has already come on record, availability of these fake notes with these two is not been strongly denied by defense team. In that regard, how do you come out that there was no mens rea? What is the best point with you? I'm not asking you to go back to the facts. Only just what is the best point when you say that we have never any mens rea to commit this crime for which we are being charged?
Your Lordship, the ingredient is missing, and even if one ingredient is missing in an offense, the offense cannot be established.
Your Lordship, I would like to continue. I'm unable to find the relevant paragraph to screen share, but I'd like to continue by saying that under section 106 of the Indian Evidence Act, if there is certain act or characteristic which point towards something else, the burden of proof to prove otherwise lies upon the defense. Someone who's carrying counterfeit notes in a bag and is not aware is highly improbable. Someone who's working with the accused number 3 is working with accused number 5 for over 6 years and has no knowledge whatsoever of his intentions is improbable.
But counsel, once that there is the link between accused number 5 and rest of the accused is missing, at best you can only succeed under 489B, proving 489B, C. Where does the question of UAPA come then?
Your Ladyship,
And even to the extent of section 201, where is the disappearance or the destroying of the evidence?
Your Ladyship, call records of accused number 3 clearly derive the connection wherein he, which clearly prove that he was in contact and constant touch with accused number 5. Moreover, the witness statement given by prosecution witness 2 also signify that Mr. Kalu was in constant touch and contact with Sohail. This is another witness, Shah Rukh Khan, who had clearly witnessed Kalu, and Sohail interact with another third person in the town of Malda. Therefore, the connection.
CDR shows only the calls made. If we do not know, does prosecution have anything to show that what was the communication?
Your Ladyship, they worked for the same organization as stated by Kalu in his 313 statement. It is very clearly mentioned they worked together for over 6 years for upliftment of poor and oppressed, which clearly was a sham. Because if they were working for the upliftment of the poor, they would have transferred the same amount via bank accounts. They wouldn't have carried 10 lakhs of rupees in a general coach and hidden in a certain bag if they were doing it for a noble cause.
Okay.
Counsel, Speaker 2 of defense team, the same question which Speaker 1 has replied, I would like to put to you also. If fake currency notes were found, how do you say that there was no mens rea, even for 498B and C?
Pardon, Your Lordship, you are not audible. I skipped one part. Can you repeat the question?
Currency notes were recovered. That recovery is not being seriously disputed. In that light, how do you say that we had no mens rea to commit any crime? You were adult at the time. Your prudence must be of the ordinary person. How do you think that you will carry something in the bag where you merely say that we were not properly aware what is there in that bag? And fake currency notes are found. How do you say that there was no mens rea?
Much obliged, Lordship. The prosecution has not produced any independent witnesses which are required under section 100 of the Code of Criminal Procedure Code, which requires
mens rea is related to your mind. दिमाग के अंदर की चीज है. It would be there only. Circumstances से ही तो inference draw करेंगे.
If your lordship allow, shall the council...
We have heard you. Let us see what the second speaker is saying. आप अच्छा बोले हो, इसलिए मुझे लगता है आपसे पूछना चाहिए.
Much obliged, Lordship. The counsel for the respondent submit that they have we have already referred to the statements of the accused provided under Exhibit 7 of the moot proposition, where the statements of the accused A1, A3 and A2, A3, A1, A2 and A3 are recorded, and they have never mentioned that they were carrying the bags on orders of anyone else. They just didn't know the contents of the bag which they were carrying, and statement of accused A3 has not disclosed that he provided the fund. He provided the bags to the accused A1 and A2.
I want to put one more question to the state team.
Yes, Your Lordship.
Your case rests upon conspiracy.
Yes, Your Lordship.
accused 5 is not available, has not faced the trial.
Indeed.
You had no opportunity even to conduct investigation qua him. So whatever you are saying about him, that is in air.
No, Your Lordship.
No.
No, Your Lordship. We are relying upon the statements that were made, which actually disclosed facts which were relevant to this particular case.
A person who has not come to answer your questions which ought to be answered during the investigation, so any inference on your part may be premature. Tomorrow it may be the case कि इस नाम का कोई आदमी नहीं मिला जिसको आपने accused 5 बताया, because he is already in some other country. Anyhow, 4 has committed suicide. He has also not come forward. Currency notes are being seized and recovered. Those were fake. Now, when you took this case further from IPC provisions 490, 498B and C, तो आगे जब आप 17, 18, 19 उस तरफ लेके जाते हो, तो what extra you have?
Your Lordship.
And my sister judge also asked this question.
Indeed.
The recovery is concerned. So how do you connect your so-called conspiracy with that offence under the UPA?
Indeed, Your Lordship. Under the UAPA, we have charged them with four sections. The first one is for punishment for terrorist activity, smuggling or
we are not on this. You tell about your part of conspiracy. Yes,
Indeed.
This is the conspiracy where we're taking this offence from IPC to this very unlawful activity act.
Indeed, Your Lordship, that is what I was pointing towards. Spotting possession or smuggling or circulating fake counterfeit notes itself is a terrorist activity A, therefore would be liable to punishment under section 16 of the UAPA. Secondly, section 17.
Do you mean that this is independent offence under IPC as well as under the Unlawful Activity Act?
Your Lordship, this would constitute a terrorism under UAPA. And terrorism has not been sufficiently covered in the IPC. Because possession or smuggling of counterfeit note itself is a terrorist activity. Even if the court is to presume that no further activities is to be committed, the fact that they were caught in possession or circulating counterfeit note itself is an act of terrorism against the nation.
Your Lordships, may I point something out?
Yes.
Your Lordships, police arrested only accused number 1, Sameer, and accused number 2, Monu. Police had no idea about accused number 3, accused number 4, accused number 5. It is due to the statements of accused number 1 and 2 that they had got to know about this whole conspiracy. It is their own statements, and since they have led to this discovery of further facts that need to be admissible under Section 27 of Evidence Act, because police had no idea that there was this terrorist attack they were going to be planned. Police were only informed about the counterfeit currency that was going to be carried. So it was because of the statements of accused number 1 and 2 and during the investigation that it was found out that there was involvement of a larger there was a larger planning behind this than the accused number 3, accused number 4 and accused number 5.
Okay.
And also, Your Lordship, last thing, and if you may permit, in Firozuddin, Bashiruddin and others was the state of Kerala, it was pointed out that in a conspiracy, an act of one conspirator is I just quoted. It has been said that a criminal conspiracy is a partnership in crime, and that there is in each conspiracy a joint or mutual agency for the prosecution of a common plan. Therefore, all of these accused need to be held liable together.
Okay.
Your Lordship, the Council seeks permission to submit the rebuttals.
Rebuttals are over.
काफी हो गया. You all have done very well.
Rebuttals are over.
If you permit, I would like to point out one point I want to.
But not in form of rebuttal.
Yes, Your Lordship.
हाँ, तो यार तू बता दो. आप बहुत अच्छा करेंगे आप लोगों ने सभी ने.
Your Lordship, one of the major evidences that the prosecution produced is the call recording statements and phone data of the accused. but those evidences are invalid because they are not provided with the essential certificate as mentioned in section 65B of the Indian Evidence Act. The whole case of the prosecution is dependent on the statement of the accused, and the cold detailed records are illegally obtained by the police. The prosecution has failed to provide any other substantive evidence.
It's most important material at the last.
Your Lordship, can you repeat
The
this?
fag end.
Lordship, we were saving this for the
65B
survey, but
certificate is mandate.
Your Lordship,
Your Lordship, can you repeat this?
go
It
ahead.
was held in Arjun Panditra Kotkar versus Kailash Kushanra case that the requisite certificate in terms of section 65B of the Evidence Act is unnecessary if the original document itself is produced, which would be the original electronic record contained in the computer in which the information is first stored. So, Your Lordships, in the present case, the prosecution has been able to
Before you go over to the
इसके ये तो बहुत टफ एग्जामिनेशन है. इसमें तो आपको you have to do a lot.
Your Lordships, but
But not if you are bringing it under secondary also, there is a procedure involved in it. So
Yes.
whether this is primary or secondary, at the first instance, 65B is definitely certificate is mandatory. If you
Indeed,
are
Your
shifting
Indeed,
it
Your
to
Lordships.
secondary, it is a procedure.
Indeed, Your Lordships, but in the present case, since the mobile phones and memory cards have been presented in the court, the original documents has been presented. Therefore, it is not completely necessary to produce a 65B statement that's stated by the defense counsel.
If I may clarify, if the court permits, I would like to clarify. Electronic certification is required for electronic records. So if an electronic record such is obtained from a computer network, then a certificate would be mandatory. But for under section 62 of the Indian Evidence Act, if a physical evidence is to be provided before the court, then the certification required under 65B would not be mandatory. In herein, the physical form of evidence, that is the cell phones of the accused, have been provided before the court and presented before the court as evidence. Therefore, the electronic
cell phone में तो call details are very limited. कन्वर्सेशन तो लोकेशन आ ही नहीं सकती है. तो इट इज मियर ये तो बहुत नजदीक का मामला को कहना होगा जी देखो अभी कॉल आई थी, अभी मैसेज आया था, एसएमएस आया था, व्हाट्सएप आई थी, उसके लिए तो रिलेवेंट है. कॉल डिटेल्स के लिए तो टेलीफोन इंस्ट्रूमेंट.
No, agreed, Your Lordship, agreed. The cell phone stores only a certain amount of data, but the cloud services offered by certain cell phones which have been obtained are present and record all evidences.
They have not come in your case. क्लाउड सर्विसेज उनको प्रूव करने का भी तरीका है, वहां भी वैल्यू लाना पड़ेगा.
Your Lordship, that is why we are providing the.
सुनो,
Your Lordship, that is why.
रुको तो बेटे रुको तो. एविडेंस का सिंपल रूल है, इफ डायरेक्ट एविडेंस इज अवेलेबल दैट्स द ओनली वे. नहीं है तो उसके फिर वो जो प्रोसीजर है दे शुड बी फॉलोड फॉर एनी अदर एविडेंस. अब कई बार हम लोग कोर्ट में आर्ग्यू करते हुए कह देते हैं कि जी इसको प्रिज्यूम कर लो. प्रिजम्पशंस तो वही होंगी ना लॉ में परमिसिबल है.
Indeed.
And here you are talking about the mobile. Mobile may be the primary, but the CDR is not mobile. CDR is a record from the service provider. That would require 65B. So that is for the, when you are considering that as a primary evidence, then that requires certification.
Indeed.
65B
I
certification.
would like to point out that this argument was raised after the arguments were concluded by both the parties and we were about to close. It would be irrelevant to consider this argument.
अभी conclude नहीं वाला कुछ भी. He has at very right time he kept a very right argument in his arm और उसने टाइम पे अच्छा है. ज्यादा मत बोलो बाप, हमें नंबर देने में दिक्कत हो जाएगी. तुम सबने
Exactly. You people putting us in a very difficult situation.
The prosecution is also relying on 313 statements and the acts of the accused themselves. So CDR analysis is not the only thing that the prosecution has relied on, and that needs to be taken into account.
We will definitely take
But Your
everything in
Lordship,
that.
it has nowhere been mentioned in the moot proposition that the statements are recorded under section 313 of the CRPC.
Your Lordship, it was clarified to us later after the moot propositions were given to the teams. It was later clarified that it was the defense witnesses' statements would be considered to be as section 313 statements. The host may clarify upon this if needed.
The defense team was not aware of that?
No, Your Lordship.
Okay, okay. Organizer, please make a note. Organizer, are you able to hear us?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
We did get to know day before yesterday.
Yes, Courtmaster, please make sure that in future the teams should not be deprived of any such instructions.
Shiva.
Courtmaster, can we conclude?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, we are running short of time, so please conclude.
Yes, yes. It was a very, very interesting session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the very best to all of you.
And
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
It was a
Lordships.
pleasure to argue before
Thank
the
you,
Honorable Court.
it is requested to the judges to kindly share the results on mail and only thereafter leave the meeting.
We'll do that. We'll do that.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Madam, namaskar.
Welcome.